Hashimoto Daiki leads the all-around. Thailand had its first athlete qualify to a floor final, and the floor was not kind to most athletes. For those new here, I'm Kensley, the host of Neutral Deductions, a podcast all about men's gymnastics. This is episode 84. We'll all be sharing what happened in qualifications. So a quick overview of where we're going today. I'm going to give a couple of recaps of the highlights and lowlights of the qualification rounds. Then I'm going to get into who actually qualified for each final, maybe who to look for, where upgrades could happen, and things of that nature. So first we have to talk about Japan. They were in the very first subdivision, and the first thing I noted was that they were not all in the same uniform. So if you were wondering, like, why is this? It's because it's an individual world championships and they were not required to wear the same kit. Now, I think probably the biggest takeaway from the Japanese was that Oka Shinosuke had an absolute disaster on floor. And again, we talked about this after podium training. It's a little bit hard to tell if it was the floor itself, his illness, injury, or just a combination of all the things. And when he got done with that subdivision, he was in the 78s, which honestly, going into this competition, I would have said, I don't know if that's actually going to make the all-around final. Now, people did not do especially great trying to qualify for the all-around final, so he actually ended up being totally fine, and we'll get into that in just a little bit. The other thing about Japan is they had some really big highlights and some lowlights. So they brought their pommel horse specialist, Hirota. He fell twice on pommel horse. I would say probably the highlight for me was Tsunagai Tomoharu, who was excellent on both parallel bars and on high bar and is actually currently leading the high bar. Hashimoto was okay. He had some places where he downgraded, which we don't typically see from him unless he is injured. So he downgraded just about 2/10 overall in his program. His floor was not good. And again, just the floor was not kind to a lot of athletes. A lot of people have said in interviews that they're struggling with understanding the timing of this Taishan floor. There's also the white mats, and so they're struggling to see kind of the difference between the white lights and the white mat, and so when are they supposed to land and take off and things of that nature. So coming out of that first subdivision, it wasn't inspiring a lot of confidence for what the day was going to be like. And honestly, I have to say overall, it was kind of a disaster of qualifications for many, many people. I think one of the big questions we had coming out of the first subdivision was, where is Mahdi Olfati of Iran, who is certainly one of the favorites to get into the vault final? And what has come about is that on his Instagram, he posted that the Iranian Federation missed some deadlines, and ultimately they weren't able to compete at this competition, which is especially unfortunate because he had gotten a vault named after him earlier this year, and I think people were really looking forward to seeing that in competition. In the second subdivision, I think Great Britain was definitely the team to watch here, and they started off on pommel horse, and Alex Yoshin Cash, who is this new up-and-comer who I've been touting several times on the podcast, caught up, and he did a very, very good routine for his first World Championships, and it was actually a score, the 14.333, that was going to hold throughout the competition and get him into event finals. He is currently sitting in event finals in 7th place, so that was a really, really strong start for the British team. When they moved to still rings, both Harry Hepworth and Courtney Tulloch were, I would say, expected to make this final. They looked both pretty good on the still rings, but I would say that Courtney did have a pretty low landing on his dismount, which ultimately did leave him out of event finals. Then they went to vault, which I would have said was probably maybe one of the most comfortable finals of any of their athletes, was for Jake to make the vault final, but he crashed his Yanakura. Interestingly, this didn't necessarily mean he was for sure going to be out of the vault final, because in 2023 at the World Championships, he also crashed his Yanakura in qualifying. and then went on to win the world championships. But the vault competition here was just a little bit too strong, and so he will also miss out on vault finals. One of the athletes I absolutely really look forward to seeing is Noah Quavita. They call him like Quavita Airlines on high bar. He has this beautiful triple pike dismount. He fell twice on high bar, didn't make that final. And so like, I think you're sort of getting the gist of, oh my gosh, this this feels like it's going to be disaster worlds. And you know, I talked about in the first subdivision how bad the Japanese floor was, and I didn't think anything would really top that, but then Great Britain went to parallel bars and basically said, hold my beer. And it just wasn't good. Of course, you have 2019 world champion Joe Fraser. He fell a couple of times. It just, the whole rotation was just not what they would have wanted. I will say that Joe did end up going to high bar. I believe he upgraded by a 10th there. He is currently sitting in the top 2 for that high bar final and is one to watch there. And that's honestly how a lot of his year has gone. He's known for being this exceptional parallel bar worker, but honestly, he has done so much better on high bar this year than parallel bars. And so I'm interested to see how he'll do in the final. In terms of other athletes, Milad Karimi of Kazakhstan basically seemed completely and totally unfazed by everything in this competition. I would not say he is the most consistent athlete, but he showed up here. He wasn't doing all around, so that may have helped. And he looked really, really good. The next major team that I want to talk about is the US. This started off really sad as we got news that Asher Hong was not going to be competing due to an ankle injury that he had sustained in the warm-up gym. I think that it's of course sad if any athlete gets injured at any time. This is especially sad because his mom grew up in Jakarta and she flew all the way there, and this was going to be the first time that his grandparents were going to get to see him compete. And when I saw that, or when I got news that he had hurt his ankle, my first thought was like, oh, I wonder if he'll just come out and do pommel horse so that his family can watch him compete. And when I saw him on crutches and not even doing like pommel horse, I was like, this must be more serious than just like, oh, I stung my ankle. So we will wait and hear what that diagnosis is. The team went to high bar. I would say it didn't start off the most inspiring rotation. Donnell fell. Brody was only credited with a 5-8 routine, which is an issue that was on his Winkler skill, and I'll get more into the weeds on that when we talk about the high bar final and like what potentially his options are for there. But it just felt like, oh no, is the US going to follow in the same pattern as Japan and Great Britain? But they actually were able to turn it around pretty well. Cam did well on floor. He got a 14.3, and at that point he was into second place. I think he's sitting in third right now. So of course he did the first floor routine at a world championships with the 2 triple backs. And from the reports we got from the arena, there were teams there scouting him out, like looking for him, wanting to see this routine. I would say in podium training, he did have some struggles there. I think he almost put too much power in his qualification routines just to ensure that he was getting the triple backs all the way around. And he has a lot of room to improve his execution there. So that's going to be something to look for in finals. Patty did a very clean routine on pommel horse. He made the final. Brandon struggled on his woo and on his dismount, and he just missed out on that final. But I still stand by Team USA bringing him, because he, again, even with those issues, he could have, gosh, he was so close to making that final. So I still stand by them bringing him. I would say moving on to still rings, I was interested to see that Donnell had actually changed his routine composition. So he used to have the Azarian cross third in his routine, and now he's opening with it. And he actually put on Twitter that his previous coach Anthony is the one who reworked his routine, and he scored a massive 14.7, which put him into the lead all the way to the final rotation when the Chinese came to play and Lan Qingyu showed up and just edged him out there. He also went into first on parallel bars. He's dropped down a little bit. I want to say he's in the bottom half of the parallel bar final, but overall it was a pretty good showing for USA. So 4 of the 5 athletes who competed made an event final.
Neutral Deductions is your exclusive gymnastics news platform focused entirely on men's gymnastics. To show your support, please subscribe to Neutral Deductions' YouTube channel and follow us on Instagram.
There wasn't a lot of movement in terms of rankings for event finals in those like middle subdivisions. And so everyone was kind of waiting to see, okay, who from China is going to bump athletes out. That was sort of kind of the prevailing thought that happened was, okay, we're waiting for subdivision 8. And China, for the most part, came in and did their job. They qualified for 5 out of the 6 event finals. Of course, the absolute star of the show was Zhou Jingyuan's parallel bar routine. He qualified over a point ahead of Oka Shinosuke, and it was not even his best routine. Like, there is definitely room for him to improve, which is a crazy thing to say, because this, just to give you some sort of insight, the spread across the pommel horse final is only 4/10 from top to bottom. And from first to second place in the parallel bar finals is over 9/10. So if that just gives you any idea to what sort of domination that he has on the event and the mastery he has, it really is superb there. The Canadians were also in the 8th subdivision. Unfortunately, Felix Stolze, who was the sole Canadian doing all around here, he did not have it just wasn't his best day. He really struggled throughout several falls. He did end up still making the all-around final, but he did not make the high bar final, which is a place I thought maybe he could be a medal contender, especially because he won gold at the University Games earlier this year, beating out Hashimoto Daiki. And so I know that that's going to be something he's going to want to improve upon for the next year. There were several Canadians who could have made event finals, but it actually ended up only being Aiden Lee who made a final on pommel horse. And if you would have asked me which of the Canadians I thought was going to make a final, it wouldn't have necessarily been him. Not because he is not good on pommel horse. He is really good on pommel horse. But there were just some others who were a little bit more experienced. So that is certainly a win for him. Other things to mention, Noe Seifert of Switzerland had himself a day. He's a gymnast I mentioned in the preview who doesn't actually get a ton of attention, but I really enjoy his gymnastics. It's beautiful. At times it's dynamic. And he's a gymnast who this year has had kind of good success in the prelims and struggled a little bit in the finals. And I'm really hoping that here on this stage, he's going to be able to just put everything together and show the world how good his gymnastics is. Let's go ahead and dive in to the all-around preview. So as I kind of mentioned at the top of the show, this World Championships was kind of a disaster. And if this doesn't really sum it up, I don't know what else will. So to qualify for the all-around championships at the European Championships was a 77.365. To qualify for Worlds was a 75.365. So for reference, it was 2 points lower to qualify at the World Championships for the all-around final than for the all-around final at the European Championships. That's an average of a 12.561 across events to qualify. So again, and this is nothing against those athletes who have qualified. Like, they did their best. It just happened to be who showed up and how the people who showed up performed. But this is not typically the qualifying score that we would be seeing for an all-around final at the World Championships. Now, there are a couple athletes who I think obviously would have changed that average or changed that perspective had they been able to compete. Of course, Asher Hong pulled out due to injury. Carlos Yulo didn't do all around due to injury. Oka Shinosuke flopped really badly in qualifications, like to the point that we were not even sure he was going to make all-around finals. So it'll be interesting to see how this all-around final goes. And I'll probably mention this a couple times throughout the episode, but the FIG is actually using a new format for event finals here. So typically they only run 4 events at a time. So in the first rotation, it's typically just floor, pommel horse, still rings, and vault, with 6 athletes on each apparatus. This year, they are doing 4 athletes on all 6 apparatus at once. I'm not really sure how I feel about this. One of the things that athletes mentioned multiple times, and they wrote me messages about this, was that they felt like the pacing of this meet was really hard and they didn't have time to catch their breath because of how quickly it was going. Now, from a viewer perspective, I think having 4 athletes go and using all 6 events is actually going to be more entertaining. It's not going to be as slow. It's going to keep things moving. From an athlete perspective, I think this is going to be really, really hard. And I think the recovery is going to be very difficult. And because of that, I think we could end up seeing some very surprising results in the all-around. So that's something to watch for. So this year, starting on floor exercise in the all-around will be Hashimoto Daiki, who is the 2-time reigning all-around champion. So he has a chance to go for a 3rd straight. Noe Seifert of Switzerland, Zhang Bohong of China, who's the 2021 world champion, and Daniel Marinov of Russia, or AIN2, who we haven't seen on the world stage in a very, very long time. Starting on pommel horse is Shisong, Angel Barajas of Colombia, Florian Lonkenegger of Switzerland, and Caio Souza of Brazil. Starting on still rings is Roo Sung-yeon of Korea, Diego Suarez of Brazil, Robert Kiermes of Finland, and Oka Shinosuke of Japan. So this is going to be, again, really interesting. So with Oka starting on still rings, he's going to have to end on pommel horse. Whereas before, if you had 6 in each category, he would have been starting on pommel horse, ending on floor. So again, this is something to sort of watch, how is this going to potentially affect someone's mindset, ability, order, and so forth. Starting on vault is Timo Ader of Germany, Tierno Diallo of Spain, Majaros Christopher of Hungary, and Anthony Mansard of France. Starting on parallel bars is Yul Plata of Spain, Axeli Karsikas of Finland, Jesse Moore of Australia, and Felix Dulce of Canada. Now, these 2, Jesse Moore and Felix Dulce, both of them did not have very good competitions, and this is not typically where we would see them in an all-around international competition. So these are 2 that I think could shoot up the standings quite a bit. And then rounding out those who are starting on high bar, Vladislav Hiroko of Ukraine, Sebastian Sponovic of Norway, Oman Mohammed of Egypt, and Dagur Kari Olofsson of Iceland. Very exciting to have someone from Iceland in this final. So floor exercise, some very exciting things to look for here. Jake Jarman upgraded his floor routine, which I'm surprised I did not hear about this ahead of time. I had no warning of this. So Jake has upgraded his floor routine to a 6-3, matching Cam's world-leading D score on this event. So Jake used to do a double lay opening pass. This is what he did at Euros, and he upgraded to a triple-double here in Jakarta. Very exciting. So he is in the lead going into this final. Carlos Yulo also upgraded. So he upgraded from a 5-7 to 5-9 from Asian Championships. Cam and Jake honestly have a pretty big D-score advantage over everyone else here except for Luke. I would say Luke this is Luke Whitehouse of Great Britain. He barely squeaked into this final. He is in 8th. He took a ton of steps on his opening triple tuck, ultimately going out of bounds. I mean, he probably could get back, I don't know. I'd have to go back and count how many steps he took, but probably close to 8/10, I would think, just on that one path between the amount of steps he took and the going out of bounds. So that is something to watch. He qualified in 8th, but don't forget he can shoot up those standings. And we actually saw this from his teammate, from Jake Jarman, at 2023 World Championships, where Jake messed up in qualifications, barely squeaked into finals, and then ended up becoming world championships. So one to watch there. We ended up having the very first, we think, Thai gymnast ever qualify for the floor final, Timikporn Surintornta, with a 13.866. So he tied Luke Whitehouse, but broke the tie on execution. And then, just so you know, Cam Nelson of the USA is going to start this final, and Milad Karimi of Kazakhstan will end it. Moving on to pommel horse, a couple really big names actually missed this field, including Gabriel Tarek-Jetta, who owns the highest score in the world to date. He missed out. World medalist Lee Chi-kai is out. Brandon Ding struggled with his woo and his dismount. He missed his final, so several top contenders are not here. And as I mentioned in this preview, this was always going to be the hardest final to make. So even the slightest mess up could keep someone who could win out of this final. I would say, as I mentioned earlier with Canada, the one surprise for me here was Aiden Lee. He is fantastic on pommel horse, but I kind of expected him to fall more in that like 10 to 14th range rather than top 8. And he's the sole Canadian to make this event final and is going to be one to watch here because honestly, all the top 8 scores are within 4/10 of one another. So it really is anyone's chance to make this podium. For me, the battle here is D versus E. You have people like Nariman Kurbanov and Patty Hoops who had the highest D score with a 6.0, but Kurbanov can actually upgrade another 2/10s here. And then you have Hamlet Manoukian of Armenia, who had the highest E score, and rightfully so, because his routines are so pristine. And this final competition is actually going to be an Armenian sandwich, with Hamlet going first and Mamo closing the competition. Moving on to still rings, Donnell Wittenberg is trying to make me eat my words about saying the highest D score in the world would not win on still rings. I actually thought he was going to hold on to the lead till the very, very end when launching you came in and said, I'm actually going to take that lead from you by less than a 10th. So in my preview, what I had said is I really thought launching you was going to have the edge here with just his routine composition. I think is a little bit safer, whereas Donnell's relies so much on hitting his triple pike, which is just, in my opinion, so easy to rotate. And I just kept seeing like Donnell's name at the top, and I was like, oh my gosh, he really is going to make me eat my words. So we'll see on the finals day how he ends up doing there. For me personally, I still think launching you is the favorite. As I mentioned, I just feel like his routine's a little less risky than Donnell's, but we'll end up seeing on Friday. So rings is the first time that we will see athletes break the 9.0 mark. We didn't see any in qualifications on floor and on pommel horse. Zhang Boheng of China broke it with a 9.1E with only a 5.5 difficulty, which put him in the bronze medal position. A couple of surprises for me. Glenn Cole of Belgium and Kaya Souza beat out Courtney Tulloch, Artur Vestian, Kanata Kichi, and Samir Eid Saeed, like a couple of the names that we see over and over and over again in these finals. And so that's always exciting to watch when you see, again, it's not that they are not exceptional athletes, but when you have maybe a couple of surprises in those finals, I always really enjoy that. And so I'm looking forward to seeing their gymnastics in the final. Day 2 of event finals will feature vault, parallel bars, and high bar. For the vault final, the main miss here is reigning world champ Jake Jarman. He fell in his Yanakura, his very first vault, and he is not going to be in this final. And he was many people's pick for winning the title, so it will be someone else. Carlos Yulo of the Philippines, with his near perfect form, took the top spot in qualifications ahead of Artur Dovtian of Armenia. Maybe one of the names that's not as well known here is Italy's Tommaso Brignami. He was the 2023 world champ on vault, and Brignami will start this vault final, and it will actually end with Artur Dovtian. And I love this because this could be one of those very, very dramatic TV moments where the winner is the last one to perform and everyone's on their seat. And like, typically in arena, they have, this drum beat, and it's very dramatic, and they see, who wins. So Artur Dovtian was, I believe, my pick to win this vault final. And so I really like that he's going last, because assuming he hits and does very well, I think it will make for a very dramatic show for everyone to watch. In terms of parallel bars, it is 0% a surprise, I think, to anyone that Zhou Jingyuan is leading. And as I mentioned earlier, he put up a massive 15.466 with a 6.0D score and a 9.366E with a stick. And the crazy thing is there is still room for improvement in that routine. It really is just like watching art in motion. He is almost a full point ahead of Oka Shinosuke of Japan, who is no slouch on parallel bars. And I just, again, remember the spread on pommel horse, 4/10. The spread from first to second on parallel bars alone is almost a full point. This is one of the only finals where multiple people got two per country. So both China and Japan with Jung Bo-hung and Hashimoto Daiki had athletes who were two per country out of this final, making room for two Russian athletes, Vladislav Polyashov and Daniel Marinov. The most surprising miss of this final is probably that Ferhat Arijan just missed the final and that Donnell Wittenberg did make it, which is kind of crazy if you think about it, because if he had not stuck his dismount, he actually would not have made the final. So it's just one of those moments to show that literally every 10th matters. And then we have high bar. So this was the only event final where all of the medalists were back the next year. So all four medalists, Oka Shinosuke, Angel Barajas, and then there was a tie between Jung Bo-hung and Tong Chao-hung. None of them made the final. And if you were around for the Olympic Games, this was the most surprising podium at the Olympics. Like, everyone fell. It was a horrible final. And it just goes to show that like anything on high bar can happen. I think it's the hardest final to predict for that reason. So Tsunogai Tomoharu of Japan is in first place with a 14.8. Joe Fraser's in second with a 14.533. Then Hashimoto Daiki with a 14.4. Carlo Mancini of Italy with a 14.233. Milad Creamy in fifth with a 14.2. Brody Malone in sixth with a 14.166, which we do need to talk about Brody for a moment because his D score was hit pretty badly on his routine, and it's because of the skill called a Winkler. So in late September 19th of this year, the FIG Men's Technical Committee came out and clarified how they wanted this skill performed. And I think that this is ridiculous. I think it's absurd. Like I can't say how bad of a decision that this was. By the FIG. Not that they can't change how skills are supposed to be performed, but to do so a month before the competition. Most athletes are already like leaving for the World Championships like 2 to 3 weeks beforehand because they want to do training camps and they want to get adjusted. And someone is going to work their entire year to put together a routine. And then the FIG is just going to come up and be like, surprise, actually the way you've been doing this skill, which we've counted as correct all year, is actually no longer correct. I think it's ridiculous. The NCAA has a cutoff, and the FIG needs to have a cutoff of when they can change how skills are going to be evaluated. And I've been talking to some judges, and apparently in the judges meeting, they are still clarifying how they want skills performed up to right before the competition, which is unfair to the coaches and it's unfair to the athletes. So the FIG Men's Technical Committee needs to get their ish together, and they need to figure out how to make this fair for the athletes and for the coaches. I think this is ridiculous. I cannot overstate how bad this is from the side of the leadership. And yes, all changes, for example, should be applied in January of that year, and they should not be able to change anything else, with the exception if it has to do with immense safety. I would have zero problem if they said, we're going to change the dismount rule effective immediately because of safety risks. But they're not even doing that right now. They're waiting till 2026 to implement that. So why could they? Anyway, I could go on and on and on and on about this, but that's what happened to Brody's routine. So for finals, I don't know what Brody is going to do because the Winkler was a huge part of his difficulty score. So basically, from my perspective, he would either have to do that skill from a giant rather than from like a tap, or he would have to maybe like submit a new skill, like a piked winkler maybe. But I think maybe the cutoff to submit a new skill was before podium training, but they have made exceptions to that in the past. So I don't know. We'll see. I have no idea. I'll be very interested to see what Brody's routine construction is going to look like, because likely he is going to need more difficulty to medal. And actually, when I saw his score come up, it is amazing that his score stayed in finals contention, because there were so many good high bar workers who could have easily knocked him out, and they just all really messed up their routine. So he is very lucky to be in this final. Rounding out the high bar final is Daniel Marinov of Russia /AIN2 and Shisong of China. Just some general other things to know. Again, I talked about many athletes complaining about the pace of the competition. I think potentially we could see some changes and some very interesting action in the all-around final because of the pace of the competition. I would say the coverage of qualifications was not my favorite. I am so grateful that we got a video, because it rarely happens that we get a video of qualifications. However, the choices of who to show were honestly very odd. I honest to God think I saw more of a blank pommel horse than I did of the Chinese athletes. And in the final subdivision, the bias towards the French athletes was overwhelmingly obvious. Like, choosing not to show Olympic and world medalists in favor of French athletes, who are certainly capable. This is, again, nothing against the athletes themselves, but they don't have as impressive a resumes as the Chinese. And me not being able to watch the Chinese is more impactful for my coverage than seeing the French athletes. And I think basically everyone feels that way, except for maybe, the families of those French athletes. So just very confusing in terms of who to show. In terms of coverage, it is going to be switching. So the world feed will have, I believe, Ollie Hogben and Blythe Lawrence on there. So we should have that English commentary. If you're in the US, I know that NBC has the rights to that, and it'll be streamed on Peacock. BBC has the rights in Great Britain, and I'm sure they'll have a commentary team there. So for the men's all-around final, it's going to be Wednesday, October 22nd at 6:30 p.m. local time, 7:30 a.m. Eastern time. I will be podcasting after that. On Friday, October 24th, we will have floor, pommel horse, and still rings finals, 2 p.m. local time, 3 a.m. Eastern time. We will be doing a recap there with Sam Oldham on that day. I'm really looking forward to that. And then vault, parallel bar, and high bar finals will be on Saturday, October 25th at 2 p.m. local time, 3 a.m. Eastern time. And I'll be doing a recap podcast on the following Monday. If you want to know exactly who made what final, all of those are on graphics on our social media, on Instagram, on Facebook, and on Twitter. Also on our website, I have an entire document of how to watch and follow the event, for where they're going to be live streaming, where the live scores are, so you can catch all of that information there. And then, of course, if you're struggling to find it, you can, of course, message me and I will help you out there as well. Thank you again so much to everyone who has been moving over and watching the podcast or listening to the podcast on YouTube. We are starting to see a shift in some of the numbers from Spotify or Apple Podcast over to YouTube, which is really helpful, because just choosing to listen to it on YouTube means we get a few extra cents for each of those listens. And it does add up. Again, it's not a lot of money, you guys, but it is a very simple way that you can help us actually earn some money covering men's gymnastics, which is really exciting and very helpful to us. If you do want to donate financially, just straight give us money, you can do that via PayPal or Stripe. And the link is at the bottom of every article on neutraldeductions.com or in our show notes. If you have questions, comments, or insider tips, you can email us at neutraldeductions@gmail.com. That's all for now. We will see you after men's all-around final.